I welcome Jeff to Lessons from Learning Leaders. I appreciate. I want to tell everyone. This is full disclosure on my part. I think I have never failed more. Failed an interview guest more than I failed Jeff here. I think we had an appointment and I spaced on it. And then we had another appointment and I spaced on that too. And I think third time's a charm. Or did I miss 3 times?
No, this is the third one, and it is going to be the charm for sure.
Ooh, and I felt so bad. I remember I looked at my phone and I was like, that was today. And I just felt so awful. And Jeff, you were so gracious to forgive me and give me the opportunity to talk with you today, because you're going to be training at the 2026 Training Conference and Expo, and you're doing something called the Gift of the Pebble in Your Shoe. So 2 years ago,
Yes.
I've been on this Boy Scout hike with my kids at Philmont Scout Ranch twice now. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. The last time I went, we did a 14-day trek in the New Mexico mountains, and we hiked 127 miles. At no point during that 127 miles did I consider a pebble in my shoe a gift. So I want to hear how I should reframe that. But first, Jeff, can you just tell me your story? How'd you get started in this, and where are you at today?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so glad we are able to make this happen. My story begins at human resource development for Polk County schools back in the late 90s. And my first gig was working as an assistant for teachers who were getting their national board certification.
So when you say Polk County, do you mean up in Iowa?
In Florida,
okay,
Central Florida.
Because there's a Polk County in Iowa, and that's where Des Moines is. And that's what I was familiar with. So I was like, hey, we're neighbors. But no, Florida. Sorry, go ahead.
So started there as my first job in the industry, as it were. From there, I went on to do a few years at Disney, a few years at Target, and a couple odds and ends in between. But for the last 15 years, I was the director of training and organizational development for a company called J.J. Taylor Companies, which owns a couple of different distribution companies across the Southeast. So, yeah, a long time in this. For 27 years now, I've been at L&D in some way, shape, or form.
That's fantastic. You said Disney. I didn't know that about you. You were at Disney. You doing training at Disney?
Yeah, I was a park operations trainer, Area 4 operations, as well as outdoor foods, both at Hollywood Studios, and did a little bit of work with Disney, the internal side, Disney University as well.
So you're the third person I've had on the podcast who was a trainer at Disney. So Lynn Milbauer, I don't know if you're familiar with him. Yep. He was on just a couple episodes ago.
I do know Lynn. He's great.
Lynn is awesome. And Pete Blank, who's a friend of the show also. He's there. Apparently I need to get a job at Disney so I can add that to that's what all the cool kids do, is they train at Disney.
It's an excellent proving ground. They are masters at it. When you have an operation like they do in Orlando, we're talking 60,000 plus employees, and you're turning over entire swaths of them every 3 to 6 months through the various college and international internship programs. It's a master class in onboarding and new hire training, which is where I really got to cut my teeth in those areas.
So why training though? I mean, you talked about human resources. There's a lot of different paths you can go down there. What is it about training, Jeff, that keeps you coming back to do it?
Well, I love learning, but I hated school.
You and I are going to be best friends.
I love learning. I love, call it teaching, if you will, but I never enjoyed traditional academia. And when I was in high school, I was in Future Business Leaders of America, and we went to the national conference out in Long Beach my junior year, and I attended a breakout workshop. They run it very similar. In addition to the competitions, they run a lot of little breakout and workshop sessions and things. So you get that feel of what it's like to go to a conference as a high school student. And I remember taking a workshop with a gentleman named Skip Lamani, and Skip ran one of the most brilliant little pieces of learning that I'd ever seen. And afterwards I went up and I talked to him, and he explained that was his job. Like he was a corporate trainer. He was a consultant and corporate trainer. And just immediately, even at that age, I was like, okay, this is it. Like, if I can get paid to do that, if that's a career option, to be someone who can foster learning and do cool stuff like this, and they'll give you money to do it, I'm in. And so the whole career has been a pursuit of that work and that passion and loving to learn, loving to help others learn, but not wanting to do it in a classroom setting or a formal academic environment.
Mm. Yeah, there's so much to that where and I think about what you said. I love learning. I was talking to somebody the other day. I don't you can see the background. It's not, my room's nothing but books. And I was talking about the concept of ikigai. Are you familiar? It's a Japanese
I
concept.
am.
Yeah, I love the
Yep.
idea of ikigai. And we were talking about self-actualization. I brought up ikigai as in this conversation. And I said what I love learning, but I imagine you're the same way. I get I nerd out on this stuff where it's not enough that I learn it, but as soon as I learn something, I'm like, everybody has to know this. I've learned something and now I have to tell everyone. I had a friend of mine who he was in a meeting and somebody said, "Well, Dwayne just Dwayne just silos information," and everybody looks at everybody. And they're like, "What?" And my friend said, how many people in this room have had Dwayne call them this week and say, I just learned this. Did you know this? And they were all like, me. And I think that you laugh, but I think that's part of you too, where you learn something. You're
Mhm.
like, I've got to shout this from the rooftops.
Yeah, my wife calls it information hoarding, which I don't know if that's better or worse than siloing. But yes, that is exactly it. And that's the impetus behind the speaking, the blogging, the podcasting, and all these other things is just the incessant need to take all this stuff that I'm absorbing and get it back out in the world in some sort of way.
So you talked about being with JJ Taylor's for 15 years, but now it looks like you're doing something called A Pebble in Your Shoe Consulting. Tell me about that.
Yes. Yeah. So this summer I decided to sort of hang my shingle, as it were, and take the lessons learned from 15 years of building what we built and bring it to more companies, more places, more teams, and people that could benefit from all this wealth of experience and knowledge that I've been accumulating being down in the trenches of the corporate world for the last decade and a half. And so I ventured out with my new venture, Pebble in Your Shoe Consulting, and I'm doing traditional consulting, doing leadership coaching, and doing speaking as well. So a little bit of all of those.
That is something I think a lot of trainers, spend some time daydreaming about is especially after the meeting
Yep.
that doesn't go your way, when you're just back in your office going, "Yeah, I can make a slide deck, but that's not gonna do anything. I gotta just go out and do this on my own." You've had that conversation, right? Uh,
Oh, many times, yes.
how, what has been I wanna get to your presentation, but now I'm curious about this. What's been the biggest challenge that you faced as you've started this up? Because I know there's a lot of people who are listening to this who daydream about it, but they get nervous, they get scared. I've said before, there's a like a security blanket, around a job, and you lose
Of
that
course.
when you go out on your own. So what have been the challenges, and how have you overcome them?
Hmm. The challenges are exactly what you expect them to be, right? It's finding people to connect with that understand what you want to do, can share that passion, and then of course ultimately are willing to cut a check and pay for it. Um, that is the hardest part, and it takes time and it takes effort and it takes a lot of hustle to do that. And I will not even pretend that I've reached anywhere close to the levels that I want to yet. It is every challenge I thought it would be, and as far as overcoming it, ask me again in 12 months and we'll see how it's going. But so far, the early wins have given me the motivation to keep going. And so that's the best thing I can say is if you can find a way to get some early wins on the board, find that one first client that really shows that, shows you to yourself that you can do this, then that success breeds the motivation to keep driving after it for sure.
There
But it is scary. I wish I could tell you it wasn't. I wish I could tell you, oh no, it turns out it's great. You should totally do it. Nah, it's scary and it's an uphill battle and it's a hustle, but I think in the long run, it's going to be worth it. So we're going to keep at it.
Yeah, you got to, and I like the fact that you said ask me in 12 months, which means that you're not even thinking about anything else. You're like a year from now, still be putting this in. There's a book over there on my sales shelf. called Go for No, I think it is. And one of the things they talked about in there that I liked is the idea that a lot of salespeople, when they first start, they'll do the typical thing. They'll go to friends and family, and they'll try to sell them. Hey, you need to buy this, mom. Hey, you need to buy this, Uncle Fred. Hey, you need to buy this, friend of mine that I've known for 10 minutes. And what they talked about in there that I liked is they said, don't go to them and try to sell them. Go to them and ask who needs this. And then
Yeah.
they're going to be a lot more likely to say, actually, I know 10 people who could use this. And I found that to be a good way of finding leads because for
Yep.
some reason people there's that reciprocity idea too. And the reciprocity
Correct.
being they're going if they say no to you and you accept that, which you will, what are you going to do? Just grab them and shake them? No, you're going to listen to me talk about pebbles in your shoe. Yeah, but you accept that. So now in psychologically speaking, they owe you. And so when you say, I totally get that. Do you know anybody who could use this? They're gonna that reciprocity circle is gonna kick in, and they're gonna say, "Actually, I know a few. Let me write their names down for you." And that's a good way of getting started. So, but let's go back to Pebble in your shoe, because
Yeah.
what's the story here? Because again, I I get a pebble in my shoe, and I'm like, now I'm 54. I've got to sit down. I've got to take my shoe off. How is this a good thing?
So you just described exactly why it's a great thing in the context of what we do. So you get a pebble in your shoe, what happens? You got to stop what you're doing. You got to change something that's going on in order to make things better. And in the world of L&D, our entire focus is on behavior change, right? Our goal is to get people to stop doing what they're doing and do something different. A pebble in your shoe is a catalyst for change. It is the idea that something now must be dealt with and it can't be ignored and it can't be brushed aside. You now have a catalyst for change that is going to create a new outcome. And that is always, in an L&D perspective, an opportunity to make change for the better. And so I call it being pleasantly uncomfortable. If I can put a pebble in your shoe, metaphorically speaking, what I've really done is I've given you something you can't forget, something you can't ignore, something that is going to force you to change the way things are going for you. And if that's not the ideal goal of every training that we bring people into, I don't know what is. I think the hope of every trainer is that when people leave, whatever we taught them has stuck with them beyond the classroom and forced them to change something about their world. And to me, that is the gift of a pebble in your shoe.
So when someone comes into your class there at the training conference and expo, what are a few of the things that you're gonna explain to them? Just a little teaser, so people watching this will be like, okay, I got to go see what Jeff's got to say.
Yeah. So for the last 15, 20 years, that philosophy, that pebble in your shoe philosophy has helped me hone and craft all of the success we had in around training, development, culture, et cetera. And so what I'll be talking about in February is some of the ideas that led to those types of long-term changes, some of the little tips and tricks I've created over the years for creating those pebble in your shoe moments. I'll give you one perfect little example. Um, One of the tricks that I use when it comes to training is branding. I think of training very much in the way that marketers think of product. And so if you look at advertising, an advertising jingle gets stuck in your head, no problem, right? We can all sit here and remember our favorite advertising jingles. And yet trainers, those of us in the field of L&D, we're constantly complaining, oh, learners never remember anything. 5 minutes after they walk out of the classroom, it's just, they've forgotten everything we told them. If they can remember that, Mentos is the fresh maker, why can't they remember what they just learned in training? There are ways to get into people's brains like that. And so using the same techniques of advertising and marketing is one of those little pebble in your shoe moments that I'll be going through and giving some examples of how we created little miniature brands around certain ideas or concepts in our company that turned them from things you learned in training to things that were cultural touchstones, that were catchphrases that got passed around amongst employees, that were little jingles in their head that they couldn't forget, whether it was in the realm of safety or sales or operations or whatever. And so those are those pebble in your shoe moments, the ability to create something inside of training that sticks with people long after, and ultimately, if it's done right, also sparks them to take action and change something.
Now, have you found that that's something that works in class, or do you have techniques to help transfer that as well after class is over? What do you do there?
It's both. You gotta go into the design of your course thinking about those outcomes. You've gotta go into the design of your course building those moments. They're rarely organic. They're rarely things that just pop. They're very much intentional design elements going in where I'm asking myself, what are the key things here that need to be taken away? And how are we going to then create those moments? Which, going back to the Disney approach, that was something I learned at Disney early on, is everything is for Disney is about show and what is that guest experience and what are they going to see and how's it going to behave and interact and how does the entire environment play into it? And so taking those lessons and applying them into the learning environment is a really great thing. Quick example for you, Dwayne. I think you'll love this. So one of the things that I learned from Disney, I applied to all the Train the Trainer programs I ever did. When you take Train the Trainer at Disney, you show up at a building that you've probably never been to before. You're checked in by a receptionist. You're asked to wait in the lobby. And about 7 or 8 minutes past the start of the class time, you and everybody else is still sitting in that lobby. And then about 9 or 12 minutes after that, finally somebody pops out from the back and starts to explain that there was a mistake with the room and everything's kind of a mess and we're going to get this fixed for you and we'll get going momentarily. And then in about 3 or 4 more minutes, that same person pops back out and says, okay, we also seem to have an issue with our trainers not here yet. So we're trying to get that settled. Why don't we move you guys into this room along the way? And at that moment, they take you into what you think is this other waiting room, but in fact is the classroom, and everything, of course, is laid out perfectly and ready to go. And what you find is the first lesson of the day was what it feels like when training isn't prepared for you. And as a trainer, that stuck with me far more than any classroom lecture on what makes a good first impression, right? We experienced the bad to be revealed into the good. That was a pebble in my shoe moment. It's one of those lessons that stuck with me forever and changed the way that I approached my day one as a trainer and ultimately led to how I would train others to be trainers as well. And so it's creating those little moments that create that, impetus for action that I think changes everything,
Yeah.
because it's memorable, because it's action oriented, and because it hits us in a place beyond just logic. It hits us in a place that's also emotional and therefore engaging.
Emotion is such an underappreciated tool, really, in training. There's a lot of people, and you see this, I think, with a lot of SMEs. I've made some made a paradigm shift over the years. I'll bet 20 years ago, I remember reading an article, and it was rocket scientists are not allowed to teach physics in public schools. And I was like, that's dumb. Who knows more about physics than rocket scientists? They should just let them teach. And now I'm like, yeah, they would do nothing in that class because they would be up there and they would be teaching at such a level that would probably be over the kids' heads. They would be operating, with the curse of knowledge. Well, you all know this, and they would not be operating in a way. They would simply be telling, and telling ain't training, right? Telling ain't training.
Right.
And you reminded me. Let me see if this is what you would consider a pebble in your shoe moment. I was teaching an economic theory to a room full of folks who were not economists, right? And I had to explain to them why people take action, why we all take action. And this is called the human action model. It's from a guy named Ludwig von Mises. So already you're like, right? And I explained to them that to get someone to actually get off the couch and do something, you have to first create a sense of unease. And then you have to give them a vision of a better state. And this relates to training too, really. If you want someone to accept your training and move on, you have to give them a sense of unease. I'm not doing things efficiently right now. I'm not doing things as best as I could. If I do it this way, I can save time. These are all senses of unease and a vision of a better state. But the third part is you've got to give them a realistic plan to achieve it. So if you go out there and you have all these things that you think will be great, and they say, "Okay, how are we gonna do that?" And you're gonna go, "Well, just do it." Just imagine this would be great if we did this, and like, "Yeah, it would be great. How are we gonna do it?" And they're like, "No, you don't get it. It would be great." "Okay, I need a plan." They're not getting it. I don't know. So I had to explain this all to them. And after I'd done that, and I said, "I want you to understand, this is something you experience every day. Every single day. You've already experienced it today. I guarantee it on the drive over here. And let me show you how you've seen this every day. Show of hands, how many of you are paying too much for car insurance?" All the hands went up, right?
Yep.
And I said, "Well, how would you like to save 15% or more?" And they all sat back. And I said, "Now, how do you do that?" And they said, "Well, you go to geico.com." Like, that's it. Here's your sense of unease. You're paying too much for car insurance. Here's your vision of a better state. You could save 15% or more. Here's the realistic plan. Go to geico.com. And it went from this really bizarre economic theory by a guy named Ludwig to the Geico Gecko that they're all like, "I get it." So would you consider
Yeah.
that sort of a pebble in your shoe moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what has made my journey through L&D a little different than most is that I grew up in companies that were brand and market focused, right? Disney, Target, these are entertainment companies, these are retail companies. My background, my education wasn't in traditional adult learning or education models or education theory. My worldview on how you get people to remember things comes from entertainment and marketing. And so, yes, the Geico Gecko is a perfect example. And again, I say to all you L&D folks who are out there going, why can't I get my learners to remember stuff? I don't know, but Geico can.
Yeah.
Geico got it done and you didn't. So maybe it's time to broaden our view of L&D beyond just adult learning theories of tradition and ask ourselves, how are these same exact theories, to your point, it's the same underlying theory by Mises and all these folks. Why are insurance companies and soda companies getting it and we're not? It's because I think sometimes we come at it a little too academically, a little too built on the theory, a little too SME focused instead of really focusing in on what I love, which is these pebble in your shoe moments of how do I just create a spark that's going to become the catalyst for change? How do I create that uncomfortableness that forces people to say to themselves, well, yeah, I can't be like this anymore. There's something in my shoe. It won't go away. I can't ignore it. I got to do something to resolve the problem and then serve up that solution on a silver platter to say, well, if you do this, the behavior that I need you to take away from this, then you can have everything you want and feel good again. So change doesn't happen until there is a moment of catalyst, a moment of uncomfortableness, and that's that pebble in your shoe. And when you're changing for the better, then in hindsight, that pebble was a gift. It gave you the opportunity to do something different and really pushed you outside your comfort zone in a way that turned out to be for the best.
Yeah, people don't do things unless it's to avoid pain or gain pleasure, and very often
Right.
we are more motivated to avoid pain than gain pleasure. And so the idea of a pebble in your shoe, you are going to stop and you're going to fix this right now. What do you say to folks who are nervous about being anything other than more of a professorial sage on the stage type? Because I've I had some folks I was explaining my training philosophy. I'm like, look, we Bob Pike taught me that the learning is inherent is attached to the amount of fun that a person has in the class.
Yep.
And so what I got back was, well, what if there's VIPs in the room? What if there's C-suite people in the room? What if the CEO or the CFO is there? I mean, we can't make them do these things. And I just sat back and I said, "Why not?" Well, how would you reply to that? How do you train this way when there's very, very important people in the room?
Exactly the same. My CFO loves to have fun. My CFO or CEO was a guy who raced sailboats and had, a collection of weekend toys and loved to talk about that stuff. And the idea that because someone has a certain title in front of their name means that they're any less of a person and doesn't enjoy fun is missing the forest for the trees. I do it exactly the same way, because here's the thing. And we ran programs. I've had every bit of my leadership in rooms at different times. And the comment that I remember getting back from my CEO early on in my career, when the first times he saw me in there, was his saying to me, "That's the most engaged I've ever seen my people be in a training." So if you're worried about putting on your best effort with them in the room because you think they're going to think it's silly, understand that they're also looking not just at you and what you're doing. They're looking at everybody in the room, because that's their instinct to say, well, is this working? And when you know that being fun and having a good time and doing these things is going to work for all of the participants, why wouldn't you put on your best showcase with that group in the room? If you're doing things that are so inherently silly that somebody would be embarrassed to be a part of them if they were the CEO, I promise you they're just as embarrassed even if they're a frontline supervisor. Don't do those things. Knock that off. Don't do silly role plays, and don't do juvenile stuff that you wouldn't do in front of a CEO in the room. Instead, build your training in a way that appeals to everyone, but most importantly is effective. And if you're doing that, who cares who's in the room? I hope they're in the room. I loved when senior leadership walked in the room, because that was my moment to show them just how impactful and engaged and great what I was delivering on their behalf could be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You need to have it in a way that people can learn, but they can have fun. And when I was talking to this guy, I was like, look, they're people too. They're not lizard people. They put your pants on the same way we all do in the morning, and they're paying for this, right? They want this to be as effective as possible. This isn't a situation where they're going to fire you for this. You're doing what they want you to do. You're making their people better. And trust me, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And you move forward from there. So let's say, Jeff, there's some folks on here who want to reach out to you, and they want a pebble in their shoe, right? How can people get a hold of you?
www.apebbleinYourShoe.com. You can catch me there. It's got all my links to all my socials, links to my podcasts, links to getting in touch with me, all of the above. So just head to apebbleinYourShoe.com and you'll find everything you want to know.
I'll have that linked up in the show notes also, so we can do that. I should have known that you do podcasting. I should have done that in my research, but as soon as I saw the mic set up and the sound, and I was like, this guy's a pro. He's got it going on. So
Yeah, I had 2 shows over there that people can check out. So
I will link to
I'll have to
those
get you on
also.
one.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Listen, I don't know if I'll be down there in Florida this year. Like we talked about before the show, for me, things are in a bit of a state of flux right now. We'll see what happens. But if I'm down there, I look forward to sitting through your class. It's the gift of a pebble in your shoe. It's at this year's training conference and expo, training magazine conference and expo down in Orlando. Have you been before?
Oh, yes. I've been a big part of the Training Magazine gallery of stars for the last few years. I'll also be running the podcasting lab again this year at the expo. So for those coming, even if you're just coming to the expo hall, and you can check us out at the podcasting lab. We'll be doing live podcast recordings. We'll be helping people see how podcasting can become a part of their learning as well. So those are my 2 big ones there this year, is my breakout session on A Pebble in Your Shoe, and also the podcasting lab in the expo hall.
Now that you mentioned that you run the podcasting lab, I'll bet we've talked, because I've been through there. I've been there multiple times, and I've stopped at the podcasting booth before. So I bet you we've crossed paths more than once. So,
Probably.
I hope you have safe travels down there. I hope you have a great conference, and I hope your room is overflowing, and that the need to get more chairs for you is a gift of a pebble in someone else's shoe. So,
I hope so too.
thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.